Joining us on the line now from the UK is J Cadavori to talk about his debut novel, Catacombs of the Damned. Welcome to the book show, PJ.
Well, thank you, Hannah.
It's good to have you with us. So I was interested reading your biography and everything, finding out a little bit about what you've done in the past. And you've gone from sort of maths and numbers to words and writing.
Yes, it's one of these things I've always been interested in ever since A-level English literature. And it's finally now, having retired, I've got the time to pursue the pursuit of a hobby and an interest in ancient history and books and things generally, which I've now suddenly got time to do that.
That's great. And with regards to the topic that you're writing about, what inspired you to go down the horror route, if you like?
Yes, there's a number of things that I don't know whether your listeners can look at my blog, because on the blog there's a picture of the house I live in. It's a 17th century manor house which looks really spooky, and there's a picture of it there on a cold windy night with the moon hanging down over it, and you walk past that and you have to think ghosts and spooks and ghouls. And so that was the first thing. Then I thought I'd like to write something about the village, or about a village generally. And then of course I came across James Herbert, who was probably the best chiller horror writer of all time. And then what I was writing took on a life of its own in terms of bringing in ghost stories and things of the paranormal.
So are you a horror fan? James Herbert, the kind of books that you would read?
Yes, I am. I'm very much a horror fan these days, and I've got into Anne Rice now and on the vampires.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's very much horror based.
And what do you like about those kinds of stories? How would you explain your reasonings for enjoying them?
Well, you're examining things which a lot of people can't see and can't feel, and they believe these things don't exist, and ghosts don't exist. Now, in this house, certainly, in my grandmother's day, that she claimed to have seen a woman ghost on a fairly regular basis, and visitors to the house also claimed to see shadows and shapes, which I personally haven't seen. And so it seemed a natural progression to look at this, look at the paranormal, and to be interested in it. Primarily because, of course, nobody can prove whether it exists or not.
Yeah. So with this house that you live in, that you say looks a little bit spooky, do you ever feel that it's a bit spooky? Have you ever been scared yourself?
No, I've never seen anything myself, with the exception of about 3 or 4 months ago. I was writing about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have a huge attic space above me, and I'm sure that I heard footsteps going across the attic. But I didn't go up there to look. It was too cold and dark.
Yes. Well, I suppose if you're getting into the mindset of writing this kind of book, I guess if you're living in the kind of place where, well, you're potentially setting the story in some way, surely that kind of thing must, I don't know, happen more often. You know, you'd think your mind would be running riot.
Well, I think it does, and somebody else said to me that when you start writing about ghosts and the paranormal, then it seems perhaps it attracts the ghosts and the paranormal.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There are no answers.
I'd feel safer writing a book like this in the library, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in that. But then you wouldn't have the atmosphere, and
that's true.
And I find one of the writing styles is to get the atmosphere and to get the feeling of particularly a really cold winter's night when the wind is howling outside and the rain is battering against the windows, and you've got an old tree outside where the branches keep knocking and you feel somebody's knocking to come in at the window.
Yeah, so it probably adds to your writing experience then.
Yeah, it does. It certainly it puts you in the mood, and you actually feel what you're writing, because I think one of the skills that I learned from James Herbert is that when you're reading his stuff, you're actually there on the page with him, and that sort of feeling can only come, I think, from actually being in the in the area where you can see and feel things happening.
So how much sort of preparation and planning did you need to do for the story and the characters before you started writing?
Well, not a lot, because it started off, the first 15,000 words was just a celebration of a country village. And then it started getting more involved, because the characters, what I found was remarkable, they developed their own personalities. And they all started going off in different directions. And then, of course, the paranormal started creeping in. And then it really got quite dark in places. And, of course, being next to the church, we've got the graveyards and the catacombs, and it all rather grew as the novel progressed.
And how long did it take?
About a year and a half.
Wow, that's amazing for your first book. That's what, from beginning to end?
From beginning to end, yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And have you already started on book 2?
Yes, I have, yep. And I'm about a third of the way through that. That will take a little bit longer. It's a far, far greater scope, but it's the same sort of concept.
Mm. So looking at the characters then for this book, Catacombs of the Damned, tell us about the couple who move to this home.
Yeah, this is a very, very much a normal couple from London who've got 2 young children, and they feel they need a little bit better quality of life, because it's so easy in London to get sucked into working all hours of the day. And they felt that if they go to the country, they could trade into a larger house for less money, and leave a little bit on the side, so to speak, to play with. And so they found this house, which is really based upon the house I live in. And then they found, once they were living there, that all sorts of things were happening which they couldn't explain. And then it got a much broader concept than that, because it started affecting the whole village. And this was where poltergeists, and this is where ley lines came in, because the village is on a ley line. And this is where it's a source of energy which brings out all sorts of paranormal feelings.
And the village is called Little Daunting.
Little Daunting.
I don't like it already. You can just imagine, can't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the funny thing is, it could be almost any village along the south coast.
Mm. And what kind of time period are we talking?
It's it goes backwards and forwards between the 1660s and the period now. So some of the characters are able to move from the 17th century into the 21st century.
So did you have to do a fair amount of research then on the 17th century?
Not really, no, because I've always had a really deep interest in history, and if you read some of the great historical novelists like Elizabeth Chadwick and people of that caliber, then for instance, I'm reading Michael Jex at the moment, a book called A Moorland Hanging, which is actually about the 13th century, but the 16th century I've always had a deep interest in, so it was quite easy for me to draw the parallels.
Mm. And when you finished the book, did you feel sort of sad that you'd finished, or relieved?
No, relieved, because I had all sorts of ideas for the next one.
Oh, you're ready to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got ideas for about 2 or 3, and just not enough time.
So no time to mourn the first, onto the second.
No, onto the second.
Great stuff. Well, if people want to get a copy of the book, it's called Catacombs of the Damned. It's by J Cadavori, who we've been chatting to today. PJ, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Good. Okay, Hannah. Well, it's been my pleasure, and it's been great to talk.